best in the business to chat about it today, and I'm excited to have some conversation with these two gentlemen today surrounding growing your organization through hiring and then developing your team. So let's bring them in. Without further ado, we have on the panel with us Glenn and Rob. Let's go ahead and introduce yourselves. Glenn, give us a quick introduction.
Good morning. I'm Glenn Younger from San Diego, California. I have a locksmith business there. We do primarily commercial work in San Diego, and I've been in the locksmith industry since 1974.
And you've been around the industry for a long, long time. So as far as you've hired a lot of people, you've developed a lot of different teams, and so that's kind of one of the exciting things about this. And from your own admission, you've said multiple times you've done some things good and some things you've learned from the processes, right?
That is so true. That is so true. I started out working a small locksmith business, then I worked for larger locksmith businesses, worked for about 20 some years in the distribution side. So I got this chance to see lots and lots of locksmith businesses around the country. So there was a time where I felt like if it was west of the Mississippi and it was in the locksmith security system integration business, I had probably been to that office. And so I got a chance to be a highly paid tourist and look at lots and lots of locksmith businesses. And you can tell real quickly the feeling that you get when you walk into a business, if it's a learning, growing business or if it's a dying business and they just don't know. And so probably I've seen a few thousand locksmith shops in my days. And about 15 years ago, my wife and I decided to do one last run at this. And so we bought a relatively, for our area, relatively large locksmith business. We have about 20 employees. And again, we focus on one specific thing, but the same things held true. I worked for what's now Annixter. Before that was Clark. And we went from about 30 employees to about 600 employees. And so you do a lot of hiring there. And so you get a lot of chances to make mistakes. And God knows I made most of them.
Most definitely. And I'm excited to kind of get into that conversation today. Also with us is Rob Reynolds. Give us a quick little introduction as to who you are.
Sure. Appreciate it. Rob Reynolds. I'm Director of Operations for Pop-A-Lock. Work for the corporate entity for Pop-A-Lock. My primary role there is the training and development of new franchisees. I also oversee the training for technical training, locksmith, access control, and automotive training. We currently have 1,000 employees in the organization that have grown over time. So we have a nice wide range of folks from brand new, probably just started yesterday, to 25 plus year folks. We've been open since 1991, and we literally have people that started in 1991 still with us. And so it's definitely a challenge to continue to grow at every level. It's easy for the new person, right? Because there's tons to learn, there's tons to teach, but being able to engage everyone across that spectrum is tough. It's good to see Glenn, and so we've got the East Coast and West Coast represented here. So we appreciate the opportunity to come in and see y'all.
Very cool. Well, I think really the main component of the conversation today is growing your employees, and I think you can look at that in two different ways: growing your team by hiring, right? So the hiring process as a whole, and then once they are on your team, what does it look like to actually develop your team and develop your team members and your employees so that they can be the best versions of themselves, which obviously will then correlate out to your customer service and to what's actually happening in the field. So let's start from the very top. Brand new, I'm a business, I'm trying to grow, I need to hire people. What are some kind of tips to that process to say, do I just hire people as soon as they walk in the door? Hey, you sound like you're interested in locksmithing. You sound like you're interested in this. Come on, join the team. What are we looking for as we go through the hiring process?
Sure. So this is a huge part of our business, and we've got some little sort of mnemonics that help new franchisees see the pattern. So for a person coming in, we want to be able to recruit the highest quality employee that we can. There are no ready supplies of ready-made locksmiths in the world, at least that I have yet to find. Probably out of the 2,000 or so employees, there's probably less than 20 that were locksmiths prior to coming to work for us. So what we're looking for is the right seed to plant. If we're talking about growing the business, because there is a lot of time, effort, and energy and money spent in growing a locksmith, especially from scratch. One of the challenges that I've seen, at least in my time recently, is less familiarity with tools, less familiarity with safety sort of protocols and process that someone may have gotten through a high school shop class or a high school automotive class. It's not unusual to have someone show up and I'll ask the question that my friend Brad Tyler talked to me. Have you ever changed the oil on your car? And there's a surprising very few people that have ever changed the oil on their own car. The other question, I've kind of backed it down because it almost exceeds the modern culture in a lot of ways. So I'll ask, do you own a socket set? And the number of people who do not own a socket set is very surprising. So, and you don't have to be a mechanic. You don't have to be a locksmith. I don't think this is something that people are born into, so to speak, that you have to be born a locksmith. There's a developmental process that can be applied. But the number one factor is a problem solver, a person who's curious. They like to be presented with unique challenges. Not that everything we do is always unique, and not that it's rocket science that requires a great deal of math and science and that sort of stuff. But when I say problem solving, meaning it's not an assembly line job in a lot of instances where you're just interchangeable parts and interchangeable people. None of our people are interchangeable. Everyone seems to develop and grow and form their niche. And some people are attracted to different sort of problems. Some people are more attracted to automotive problems. Some people are more attracted to electronic problems. Some people are more attracted to commercial problems, and being able to provide the solutions for those. And a big part of that is interview, selection, and screening. So we try to cast a wide net. One example, just quantitatively, that I can think of was in Atlanta, Georgia, several years ago. We had some positions. It was about 100 people applied for one position, and being able to filter through those folks. And there's some nice online tools that are available, various assessments and things. Indeed.com, which is a big, at least a big player in that area, has adopted some online assessments that you can do. For example, mechanical aptitude happens to be one of the assessments that they do, and they seem to be fair, and they seem to be fairly applied to the individuals who are taken. And if you took it, you would say, yes, this indicates someone who is mechanically inclined. So from that sort of pre-hiring and recruiting, it is such a challenge right now with a lot of the conditions that are existing in the world. For example, in Nashville, Tennessee, we have multiple Amazon facilities opening up. So if someone comes in and says, hey, I'm going to go to Amazon and have a very static known quantity of my work life versus, hey, I'm going to go out today and I have to do research on what I'm going to work on today. That seems to be, that doesn't fit everybody's mold. So that's what we're shooting for, is to find someone who's a problem solver, self-motivated, and especially knows how to use their resources to look up information.
Yeah, most definitely. I think it's very interesting. The last job posting that we had as an organization, it literally started out, it said, we are problem solvers. Like that's number one. We're not locksmiths at this point. We're just problem solvers, and we're looking for people that are excited about solving problems. I like some of those questions about when's the last time you changed your oil. One of our questions in our list is, what did you do the last time your car broke down? And if their answer is, I called somebody to fix it, then they're probably going to do the same thing when they're in the field trying to solve a mechanical problem. So yeah, you don't have to be a mechanic, but it's the knowledge of the curiosity, I guess, that you're looking for from a problem-solving standpoint. Glenn, your perspective, starting at the top, looking for new hires, looking for new team members. What are you looking for when you're trying to hire somebody?
Much like Rob, the challenge is getting people who've got a little bit of mechanical aptitude. But beyond that, the next level is really, apologize for the sirens in the background. I don't think they know I'm here, so yeah. I'm never safe. but the more we really feel like once we've got them on board, that oftentimes we can teach them some of the mechanical stuff. Obviously, if they can bring that with them, that problem solving ability, that's super important. We really look for the things that are hard to change once they're on board: the commitment, responsibility, sort of the positive outlook and purpose-driven desire that they're really trying to do something. If they're somebody who takes responsibility or not, and we're looking for that. And the other side of the interview for us that we really spend a fair amount of time talking about money management issues and sort of their need for approval and their emotional control and sort of general lifestyle challenges and what I'll group as head trash. We're looking for that, like, okay, let's not hire that. And so much like both you mentioned, we want to start with somebody who's got some ability to solve a problem and research a problem and work with their own hands. And then the next step is really those commitment, responsibility, et cetera. Trying to look for a good question that I like that might be shareable is what are the skills you would like to add while you're at this job? We're making an assumption that most people this may not be their last job, or hopefully it's not their first job, but we ask, what would you like to learn while you're here? And that tells us a lot.
That's very interesting. Just trying to understand kind of what their goals are, what they're looking for out of the employment versus, I think a lot of times, and we've had this conversation in our business meeting .online calls before about hiring, and a lot of times, and I'd be interested to get both of your opinions on this. How often are we as employers trying to make it difficult for people to join our team, or versus being trying to make ourselves an inviting atmosphere for people to come join our team, rather than trying to make it difficult or try to get them to jump through a bunch of hoops to jump in, versus trying to be an appealing or an inviting atmosphere? Glenn, what are your thoughts on that? And then we'll go to Rob.
I think you definitely want to have it so that you want to have them prove themselves a little bit. And so you've got to have a little bit of hoops jumping so that you'll know that they can do that. And because that's kind of one of the skills is finding a way, not finding a way to not do something, but finding a way to do something. So I think you have to have a little bit of that. And until just real recently, until 4 months ago, we were all in the recruiting business. We just didn't know it. We had to recruit to get people excited about coming here. And as opposed to having that situation where you'll have one job and hundreds of people applying for it. COVID has given us a unique opportunity that right now there's a lot of really great qualified people out in the workforce looking for a job that sort of through no fault of their own have been cast aside if they were in the food service business, which is a great service background. There are lots of cooks and chefs who are saying, here's what I do every day, and I'm looking for another job. And so we want to have a few hoops that you have to jump through, but we really feel like we have to recruit. We want them excited about this, like this is the job amongst a group of jobs that they might choose.
Rob, what are your thoughts on that? Do we find ourselves trying to make it complicated for people to come to work with us, or are we trying to make ourselves inviting to be a company to come work for?
I think there's two primary hoops that I can think of. One is the ability to follow instructions and to make it, just very clear and plain. For example, if you ask someone to show up with a copy of their DMV record because they can access that in the state that they're in, and they show up without it, that's usually an early indicator to me that attention to detail, ability to follow instructions, and literally the ability beyond that, even if I didn't say anything, or what should I bring to a job interview? So those sort of hoops I think are good. From a second perspective like that, it's the technology. This thing right here, we work for it, we listen to it, we talk to it. It's 90% of people can function with it, but particularly within our environment, to also be able to be so competent at use of the technology that they're also safer people, that they can ease in and out of situations and the use of the technology, so that they're not distracted driving, they're not using their phone, they're confident that they're going to be able to pull over and quickly process that material without it getting lost. But from I think an inviting perspective, for us, it's a big part of that is in the ride along. So before we send someone to any sort of training or anything like that, we're going to just spend some time on both parts to make sure that this is also the right job for them. This is not the right job for everybody. And if they're not going to be happy working here, it's a less structured environment than most people are used to. There's financial responsibilities that many people may have not taken on. So we try to do that right along and to see if they're going to fit in the culture with us. It's very communicative, sometimes overly communicative, to say, okay, here's what could have happened, and here's potentially what can happen, or here's a potential problem you may run into. And so we communicate like that. And I think for the right person, when they see that this is a caring, nurturing, almost to a fault environment like that, then they embrace it, and they'll just, like a fungus, we just never get rid of them. They stay forever. So, but folks that are not about communication and that sort of stuff, it makes it difficult to force it upon somebody. So that's I'd rather them know up front and not waste their time. I mean, our time, we'd give anybody a shot, but particularly if someone comes and spends 5 days working with us and then leaves, they might have missed some other opportunity.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I think both bring valid points in with that kind of pre-interview process, right? You're giving them some type of a task. I think one of the interesting things, and I would give bonus points to people when we're going through the pre-interview process, if they ask, should I bring anything with me to the interview? That's a big bonus, because that means that they're actually being intentional and looking for ways and asking questions rather than waiting on you to give them direction and specific items to do. They're actually asking in advance to prepare, and that shows more so what they're going to be like when they actually become an employee, right? What do you think of that, Glenn?
I'm right with you there. I think that makes a lot of sense. One of the things a friend of mine in Denver told me once, he said, when people come to the interview, they're going to look as good as they know how to look. And so if they come to the interview in a wrinkled shirt, that's as good as they know how to look. Could they be trained? Yes, but they're going to come. That's as good as you may get, unless you train them specifically on what to look like when you show up at an interview or at a job site. So that was one little key that I took on the interviewing front, is we always think, okay, they're going to look as good as they need to look. And so I have a person in our front shop in our store, and he came in a suit and a tie, didn't know, and said, this is as good as I know how to look. And I think it scared some people, like, oh, he won't fit in. Well, he's fit in just fine. But that's, he knew this is the best I can dress. And so that's how he showed up. So yeah. I think that makes sense. Chad, I would like to ask you a question in terms of the invitingness. I noticed on your website, you have a place for people to apply. Does that work for you?
Yeah, so it's actually, we get a fair amount of applicants on a regular basis without really advertising for it. So it's one of the things that we've done on an outward standpoint, and from a recruitment standpoint, that we're constantly trying to drive awareness, because we've kind of adapted this philosophy that we're always looking for good people. So if they pop up in our system and they're looking for a job, we don't want to close the door for potential opportunities. So we want to always have that open. And we've had some of our best team members walk through the door or put an application online, and we weren't posting for a job. We just always have an open door looking for good quality people to join our team. So it's been really, really fun. So let me ask you guys this, because this is something that I think we're talking through the hiring process, and as we're navigating through this conversation, we're looking for the right people, we're looking for right seeds, but we're going to ask those questions to kind of weed out some of those things. What are some things that you have identified over the years through the hiring process? So I'm trying to position myself as a business owner, somebody that's doing interviews, and I go, okay, I'm getting ready to start hiring people. There is, as you noted, Glenn, there's a large pool of potential employees right now because of the economic situation. There's been a lot of layoffs, and some of the unemployment benefits that have been out there are going to come to a close soon. People are going to be looking for jobs. just because there's a large pool of potential employees doesn't necessarily mean they're all the ones that you want in your organization. Are they a culture fit, all those things? What are the things that you're looking for and trying to keep an eyeball on that you know are signs that this is not the team member that we want to have on our team? Glenn?
Are they on time? What do they look like? What questions do they ask before they come in? What do they bring with them? Many of the things that you both have said, but that's really it. Are they on time? What do they look like? What's their attitude in coming through the door? That whole first impressions things, it works for us because that's what they're going to be presenting to a customer or a client. And so what's the first impression we get? We're looking at that first impression. And then when we interview, we typically have somebody walk them out to their car just to say, hey, thanks for coming in. Appreciate getting to know you. Let me see, is your, what's your car look like? How do you take care of things around you? And there have been times when I wish I would have been the person walking out their car saying, oh, because however dinged up their car is, I guarantee you that's how their work vehicle is going to look.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that we do. Obviously we don't make that our only judgment, but just looking at how they look, physically how they look, and what image they present when they walk in.
That's a good telltale sign. Rob, what are your thoughts? What are the things that you're looking for that you know that you want to avoid?
Red flag. So red flag for us is really, you get down to logistics, is like a schedule. If someone comes in and they have a very detailed, I'm available from X to Y, but not Z to L to Q, and it seems convoluted, that's going to be tough. In other words, they're going to try to, what they're stating up front is, hey, I'm available, but I'm only available during this time. And we have to be very conscious of that. That's of what our needs are, right? I don't want to hire someone who can only work 9A to 5P if what I need is a 4P to 10 PM primary person. So that is the number. If I had to pick one thing, that would be a big red flag, is that someone that has, and everyone has some sort of logistics and limitations on their time. But in general, if someone basically, to make sure you get to that question during the process, because a lot of times the way that I joke about it, it happens like this. Oh, I'm ready to go. Yep. Oh, I just need the job. Yeah, I'm so happy for the opportunity. Great. We need you to start Tuesday. That's a problem. I can't really make it Tuesday. I've got a video game tournament and then I have to go and see my psychic after that, and then go, well, what about Wednesday? Well, the Wednesdays are really no good for me. And so when you start hearing that, it's, and I'm not talking about childcare or anything like that. There's something very distinctive they just don't want to come out and say, I'm only going to work from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. They want to avoid just saying it directly, so they try to say what they can't do. So
I've never had anybody say that they couldn't start because they had to go visit their psychic. That's pretty awesome. That would be a pleasure. So
that'd be a red flag.
So through the process, you're interviewing. All right. So we've kind of talked about that, and then we're getting through the process of selecting a team member, and now we bring them on board, right? So we go, okay, you're going to start now. The biggest task that everybody's going to face, and this is a conversation that we have all the time, is training. Rob said it earlier on. There's not a lot of people that are coming into the industry that have a lot of this training and knowledge, and a lot of us are hiring people without the experience. So the next big thing is, how do you have a well-defined practical training program that can get them onboarded through your processes, not only your processes, but the actual technical side as well. Rob, I'll kind of start with you, because I would imagine with the amount of employees that that you guys are going through, you've got to have a systematic training program. What are the lessons that a small guy, like us, that's just trying to build a team, what are we looking for? What are those things that we need to apply to our organization for a training program?
So I'll tell you, the number one is a curriculum checklist. So it takes time. It is not something you can usually do in one setting. But if you sit down and make a list of all the tasks that you really want that person to be able to perform, even in the first year, and make it as detailed as possible. Let's say that you take care of Our Lady of such and such hospital, and they have 4 different type of sergeant generations of locks, very specifically that you want them to be able to find the keys in the key box, be able to label and write those things out and issue them to the employee in the form of and I know it sounds antique, but paper, a physical piece of paper to put into a smart book. And I'll show you an example just to.
Rob's going to go get us an example of a workbook that he has. There you go.
This is a product from Smead, super cheap. It's just regular office supply piece. But what it does is it gives you protected pages to put documents in and material, as well as stuff like materials that you may issue, ID cards and things that you can use to help monitor that progress. And what you'll find is that's going to become an ever-growing document for anybody. I don't care if it's mom and pop and junior. That list, that curriculum will keep getting longer, and make sure that you put it on paper. You don't have to laminate it, because that's a place for them to take notes. It's a place for them to add tasks, for you to add tasks at the same time. So that smart book and the checkoff list is basically a huge piece of it. Intensive training, to put someone in intensive training. Aloha has a 6-day course. They have some additional automotive courses. You have various trade shows and distributors sort of trade shows, and we'll get into that. But for initial entry training is very limited. There's a couple of places in the United States that offer schools. This is more of a tip than anything dogmatic. And I got to say it, if you have a veteran, actually a veteran who has post 9/11 GI Bill benefits, Lockmasters is a fully accredited higher education institution that can accept veterans benefits to get someone into training. So, for example, the 10-day basic locksmith course, when they spend a week in there too, that is an unbelievably effective course. They have done that to military standard. It is task conditions, standards, thoroughly written out. People complain about the price. It is pricey, but for a veteran, it's literally no cost to the veteran that's on post 9/11 benefits. There's Montgomery GI Bill. There's other type of GI Bills. In addition, they get assistance. They get basic quarters assistance or variable housing allowance. I can't remember which one, while they're in there as a basis. Because I think one of the problems that can arise with a mom and pop, and I had a mom and pop for about 4 years before I had Pop-A-Lock, so it was very real to me, is we tend to think, oh, that's just this. Oh, that's just that. To quote one of our founders, it's easy when you know how. And it's hard to empathize with a brand new person. They don't even have a framework to understand what you're talking about. And to you, it's like, oh, well, everybody knows that there's 10 depths and it's 0 to 9, not 1 to 10. That should be obvious. It's not obvious. They have no clue what it is. So that intensive training gives that framework. So come back to your organization, you have something to work with. So, of course, if you followed this to the letter of what I'm saying, you would tend to try to hire and find veterans to employ, which I will tell you unashamedly, I think is a great approach to this whole piece. Folks who are, in addition to background checks and security clearances and advanced training or whatever the technical training was, they have demonstrated that basically they can learn, that they can go through and complete a course and go out and do that. And that's a huge benefit in of itself. So that intensive training, and then if you can't afford it, right, it's just expensive sometimes, to at least write out all of those tasks. In our organization, one of the things we do, for example, at my location in Nashville, we'll put up on the wall that list. And so when people come in, they can fill in what they've done, or they can put notes, and it becomes a good, clear visual sign, not just to me and not just to keep a record, but for the other employees, know where that employee stands or that technician stands, right? Hey, this isn't a master locksmith yet, but here's what they do know how to do. And so I think as we divide jobs, as people need help or they request help, or we have to designate who's going to a job, that helps you understand where the person's at. And also, I think it creates a drive to fill that thing up, right? Somebody doesn't want their board half full for a long time. So they will actively come in and go, hey, can we go find a Lagarde safe lock? I hadn't done a Lagarde yet. I did the S&G, but I hadn't done the Lagarde. I got my key, and that's that way they become an active participant in their own training. So smart book.
Glenn, any tips on the training side?
Rob, thanks. The concept of coming up with a task list, we have 15 different task areas that we do. And this was born out of, we literally bought a business that had a locksmith training school. And we looked at it and said, well, their agenda is pretty good. And it was a 8-week, 4-day-a-week kind of a class. And did we want to do that was our question. Ultimately, we decided not to. But what we did was say, okay, based on what we do every day, how well are they covering those topics? And then we went looking at other kinds of training, other kind of locksmith training, and we came up with there are 15 different areas of things we do. And, one of them is rekey locks. And so we need to have a full array of stuff on rekeying locks, and one is servicing safes. And so there's a whole bunch of things that we don't do. We do no automotive. And so there's a lot of things they would have to learn if they did automotive. We don't do that at all. And so that just makes it easier. But coming up with your task list for your customer group or for your business, I think is absolutely brilliant, Rob. And I think that that's something that you definitely want to do. Come up with a list of stuff to learn, and then be able to address the way that people learn. And if they're more than 25 years old, which I would suggest is a great age to, it's just more challenging hiring somebody less than 25 years old. It brings with it its own challenges. So we really try to, we look
like
for
my
people.
Insurance company, Glenn.
Yep.
Sound like my car insurance company now.
Yeah, no, it's the concept of starting with people over 25, their brains work differently and they learn differently. And so typically they will learn by doing, and they're going to make mistakes, and that's what helps them learn. When you're up to about age 19, you need positive reinforcements, and everybody who has kids understands the benefit of positive reinforcement. That works great until you're about 19 years old. Then you start getting those adult hormones, and those basically tell your brain, hey, you got this, you know enough. You can't keep doubling your knowledge every year or your brain would explode. So you've got this. Go ahead and move forward with what you've got, which is great. What that really is doing is hardwiring you to make mistakes. And you're going to move forward and you're going to try stuff that you're not ready for. You're going to make a mistake, and that opens up your brain. Your brain is kind of on lockdown once you get to about 25 and says, I don't let just any information in. I only let important stuff in. And the way to unlock your brain, the limbic system, is to make a mistake. Emotion also does it. Or then and they don't understand why, but just movement, just moving around. So that's why hands-on is so important. So you can talk somebody through, you can give them a book, you can give them a video, you can do a lot of things. But until they're moving their hands, their brain doesn't connect it. So motion, emotion, and failure are the three things that unlock your brain and allow you to learn. And so you've got to set them up in a spot where they're going to have an opportunity to do that. Can they physically do it? That is probably the most important thing in our mind. So we use a 3-parter, and it's really demonstrate, imitate, and practice. That's what teachers do, is demonstrate, imitate, and practice. As adults learn differently than children. You've got to demonstrate, they're going to imitate, and then they have to practice because they're not going to get it right the first time. And failure is your friend, because when they fail, if it's an acknowledged failure, their brain opens up and said, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And that's something that as you get older and grayer, as I am, you start to appreciate, those mistakes that you made really helped you learn and move forward. And we learn very little from success. All we learn when we have a lot of a success is, hey, I'm pretty good. I'm smart. I know it all. And that's not true. And so failure is a much better teacher as an adult than success is what I'm suggesting. And so just being aware of that, set people up for learning, let failure be your friend, let them fail a little bit, fail little, experiment cheaply so they don't fail big, fail on that Lagarde lock in your store, in your shop. Don't fail in front of a customer or on a customer safe. Fail easily and cheaply. Experiment cheaply, fail easily, but realize that that's one of the steps. That's one of the process of learning. Everybody who knows anything has had lots of failures to get there.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I want to even go back to. I think Rob had a very valid point on the paper book. I'm a big fan of digital, right? But I can tell you that we really forced really hardcore on going all digital on all of our training material, and then surprisingly, a lot of people kind of rolled back to it over the past 2 years. They said, we want a 3-ring binder. Give us a 3-ring binder. And so that it's exactly as he described, putting that information in there and keeping it with you, and you kind of have a growing manual with you. So a couple of big takeaways from what you guys said, and I think these are really massive for anybody that's looking to hire people and especially train them in the technical side, is to develop a checklist. And I think Rob had a valid point. If you're going to send somebody off for intensive training, that's great, but you still need to have a checklist to make sure you know what you're getting and what you're expecting for them to learn out of that process. If you develop your own training processes internally, or if you're sending it out to a third party or to another agency to train them, at least have an idea of what you're trying to get them to do. And having that collateral material, I think, is very valid, and it's very beneficial, because at the end of the day, I think historically in our industry, and you guys can kind of help me to say if I'm off base on this or not, but I think historically in our industry, it's a lot of watch me do this and learn. And so when you're trying to just watch it and you don't quite understand it, and then it's just a lot of verbal instruction, do this, do that, do this, do that. And it's hard to retain the verbal, and it's hard to retain when somebody's just saying, watch me do this. So if you can, like you said, Glenn, get your hands in there and actually learn with your hands, but then have something to reference it back to. If it's making my own notes and adjusting based off of that curriculum or that checklist that you've developed, then it now helps me to retain and have some application to the show me and listen to what I'm saying atmosphere, which a lot of times we hang up on, because I know that we've all, and we're probably all three guilty of this at some point through trying to train somebody, that we said, I remember I've told you this, I taught you this. It's like, well, I have no idea. It was so long ago, I don't remember it, but you're giving something for reference material to go off to. That's very, very valid. With that, so now once you're training people, you're putting them through a program, you've developed a checklist, you're going through that. How do I know that I'm on track? How do I know that I'm learning? How do I know that I'm growing in the organization? Are there any signs that you can point to say, hey, this is you're doing it right, and yes, how am I being rewarded for what I'm doing well? Rob, what are your thoughts on that? How do you reward through that process so that people know that they're kind of moving down the right path?
It's a great question, and it's kind of at the root of the whole discussion here is what I would consider feedback, right? Someone needs to have a feedback loop. You're not just blasting them with calls and information. You're getting something back, both for you as an employer, as well as the employee that knows that they do that. There are a ton of ways to do that. There are a ton of real formal sort of systems that people can use and take advantage of. However, from a more general standpoint, to reward the people who are in our sort of line of work, that helps to augment what you're trying to accomplish in the business. I've got a couple ones. So the first one is training. People who are involved in the business, when I say, hey, are you ready to go for advanced training on Mercedes? Oh, yeah. That's a definite feedback loop that person says, regardless of you say, okay, good job. Here's your paycheck, here's your paycheck. That's kind of regular life, right? It happens all the time. But when I say, hey, we want to send you to the school for this advanced training, or for an instance of commercial, some sort of certifications or some sort of stuff to do that. Second one is tools. lot of folks in our industry like toys, like tools and equipment. The nice thing about tools is they not only can be a reward, but they can help people to be more efficient in what they're doing. Third one for me is terrain. So if you look at a city like Nashville, there's a wide area of the city. Some parts of the city are busier. Some parts of the city have more volume. I'm going to reinforce my successful people by putting them in the most successful place, right? Where they can do the most with what that is. So give them the terrain that they can work. So a prime zone, if you would. Time off. So especially in a 24/7 business, there's lots of slots in the schedule to be able to where people go. A person who is really doing the right thing, they're really putting, when someone says 110%, you can't put 110%, but you could be 110% of average, right? You could be 300% of average. So because you can tell when somebody's performing, we have all kind of metrics and quality assurance checks and stuff that can quantify that, but forget all the fancy stuff. Hey, you're my primary person. What day do you want off? What days do you want off, to try to customize that schedule around them? And then the last one for me is simple. It's take them to lunch, not just as a group, but one-on-one. One is everybody's got to eat, right? So it's not something super special out of the ordinary, but I can learn more about my business. I can learn more about their status. I can give them feedback on a one-on-one basis that doesn't come across the same way as an email or a text message or what we call a POPA, which is a Pop-A-Lock Standard Operating Procedure, like a write-up, good or bad, right? It's different. It's sitting down with them. For me, one of the biggest things that I usually get out of those sort of meetings is ways to save money in my organization. Some people like to tell you, hey, I think we're wasting money here or wasting money there when you're doing a one-on-one through there. So I think those 5 T's for me is the engine of that feedback and that motivation and that development, that they know that they're doing a great job. If you work for me and you never ask for tools, you never ask for training, you don't care what times you work or anything, and you're just ambivalent and nonchalant, it's not saying you're a bad person or even a bad worker. They may be just fine. But for those who are, to be conscious of that those are some of the things that can stimulate and reward folks and help the business at the same time.
Glenn, what are your thoughts?
Those are terrific. I love it. They're all kind of your 5 T's, Rob, are kind of what I'll call learn and earn. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do. We take our 15 categories and it's a learn and earn program. And so once you've cleared one category, then you get more money per hour. And then when you clear the next category, there's a couple of things you've got to do. You've got to do a little test and sort of prove that you really know what you say you know. And once you test it, and then you have to add a question to the test so the next person following you who takes that test, it's a better test than when you took it. And it's like, I can't believe you guys didn't ask me X, Y, or Z, and you have them improve the test, and then they get a bonus. And if that's a way for them to pick up an extra 25 cents an hour, in a couple of years, they can make $2, $3, $4 an hour more than what they were when they started. That learn and earn really makes a big difference. The other thing that I think makes a big difference, and I don't want to jump too far ahead here, Chad, but the kind of idea of sort of who to teach and who to be that mentor to help them through. I think that's really valid. I've seen a lot of places where they've got the absolutely wrong person in charge of teaching, and it's maybe obvious to somebody outside their organization, but once you get started doing that, if you've got, it doesn't matter the job in distribution, we used to have to hire warehouse people, pack a box, and there's sort of a right way and a wrong way. The idea of who to teach and how to teach to begin with, asking somebody how they learn best, it's just like asking, what's your favorite color? There's nothing discriminatory about that. And asking, how do you learn best? And because we all have lots of different ways. Rob mentioned earlier some great intensive in-person classes. Some people learn well in in-person classes. Many people don't. And then you've got to be able to adapt to what their learning style is. I've had some people with either reading disabilities or learning disabilities, and one of the brightest guys I've got is not a great reader, but he remembers everything that's ever said to him.
Yeah.
And we have some people here, we're sort of multicultural, we're a border city, so I've got 3 or 4 people who grew up and went to high school in Mexico, and so English is the second language. And does that make them not as great a learner in English? Sometimes. Some of them are terrific learners, but being able to adapt your teaching style, whether it's video or readings or webinars or hard copy or digital or in-person classes, eventually we'll be able to go back to in-person classes, but any of those kinds of things can work better or worse for some people. And coming out of this, I think we're going to be able to ask that question, and people are going to say, I don't learn anything in webinars. And other people are going to say, I think webinars are the best thing ever. And that's okay. And it doesn't make them better or worse. It just makes them different. Knowing that difference is really important. But then the second bit of that is really having somebody who's going to be a mentor to teach them, really who's going to be the teacher. I see a lot of people say, well, my most experienced person is going to be the teacher. The most experienced person has almost no experience, cannot put themselves in the feet of that person who's there on their first week. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult for them to do. Somebody who's been there for 2 years, and if they're trying to teach a skill, I believe the first-time teacher learns more than the first-time student. So if somebody's been here for a year and they're teaching somebody how to change a safe combination, mm-hmm. the person teaching it learns more because they're going to get a question that they didn't anticipate. They're going to have a failure. They're going to learn more than the student actually does. Mm-hmm. And so it's a great way to expand your team. And that is to have multiple people, not have your absolutely most experienced person. I've seen that fail over and over and over again, where the most experienced locksmith is the trainer. Mm-hmm. And that may not be the best trainer, in my opinion.
No, it's valid. I can tell you another component of that is the person that's learning so that they can teach will also teach at a more in-depth or they'll cover things that maybe a more experienced trainer or teacher may omit because they feel that it's obvious. And somebody that doesn't have any preconceived notion is going to get a little deeper dive into a topic or a discussion because they don't have any reason to omit something based off of what they feel would be the obvious. I can tell you from our experience, our current training director, we found him in our own organization that way. We said, hey, we want you to teach a class on Master Keying. And he was like, I've never taught Master Keying before. I said, well, that'll be a great opportunity for you to develop a class on it. And he did. And when he did that, we were like kind of blown away because the level of depth of knowledge that he went into to teach others and the simplicity that he brought to the table so that everybody could understand it was very beneficial. And people that had been with us for years learned from it because it was at a different level than what maybe we would have gone through because we omitted things that, again, we thought may be obvious, or maybe we went too deep into something and overcomplicated it. Rob, what are your thoughts on that? One, on the different learning styles, and two, on using people that maybe you're not experienced to learn something to be able to teach others.
We were talking about feedback earlier. So one of the things that we have instituted, and I will gladly give credit to the PLDC Primary Leadership Development course from the United States Army that I got exposed to, is the ask, pause, call method. And so ask, pause, call is where you ask a question, you wait, and then if it's a group of people, then you would call on the person. If it's just a single individual person, then you would prompt them for a response. And what we have done with this, it's an extreme. If you started training, if you spoke to some Popolock that went through all the training and everything and said, what about the questions? Oh my God, everything's questions. From the very beginning, when you walk into class, we may convey some information, but we try to put the person in question, right? To say that, okay, how do you think you change the ink in this? Well, you probably unscrew it. Maybe you pull it. Maybe it breaks in half. Hey, you're absolutely right. It's to give me, it just unscrews. So that sort of mentality helps you know where the person stands. It keeps them engaged. So if you have a visual, a kinesthetic, an auditory learner, whatever type of learning style that is, because you're constantly questioning them about what you're about to do, what they're doing, and what they just did, it is surprising that it almost becomes like a rhythm, a routine. So if I come in and I'm just blasting the person, blah, 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 and then at the end of the week, I'd say we're going to take a written test. That's like the exact opposite versus we're going to make cookies today. What's your favorite kind of cookie? We're not making those type of cookies today. What's your favorite type of cookie? It's just engaging them, even if it's something simple. When someone walks into that initial class, to start asking just some basic questions, like we kind of joked about, do you have a socket set, those sort of things. But ultimately, that questioning creates that constant feedback loop, and it's hard to do. It's without sounding hokey or getting too far off course. It's very context specific, and it's something that we specifically train. And I would encourage anybody, if they have a person that's coming off the street, focus more on that Socratic sort of questioning method than a blast them with information, feed them from a fire hose. Feed them from a fire hose, but then immediately stop and ask them what the water tastes like. So that's that's our little methodology as far as trainers. Every time I have sat down and watched somebody and began to train them on something hands-on, I have a little spiel that I go through. I have trained well over 1,000 people on this task that you're performing. I've watched people's hands shake. I've watched people that just blow it apart the very first time they touch it. I've watched people that we've had to do this 10 times before they remember each little sequence. It's okay. In fact, I like watching you struggle because it means you're learning. So getting someone comfortable with that, with the learning experience, and that, hey, look, I'm going to blow it apart too. So now we're going to put it back together. Let's blow it apart again. A person who is the most experienced locksmith on the staff, and this is a little bit more kind of judgment than essentially like basic tenets, but that experienced person may need to be out ramrodding jobs and working and taking care of stuff. Sometimes a new person who just learned something remembers all of the little obstacles that they had in accomplishing the task. Oh, there's a hidden screw behind the door handle. This is the one that you have to pop the face cap off. That's why you can't find this one's on the edge of the door. Yeah, there were 5 of those. I remember we did 5 of them. And then they go through those pieces versus the experienced person that says, well, that's a lorry. You got to use an Allen wrench, and then leaves. And the person's like, a lorry, an Allen wrench. Then now they're Googling around or asking. What for us has been a ground shaking, paradigm shifting thing is Facebook. So Facebook for work, we have, just like you have groups like Locksmith Nation, the Automotive Locksmith Support Group, you have these specialized Key Pro, ClearStar, these sort of pieces. I don't care if it's just 3 people in your organization and they don't use Facebook at all and they only use it for work and they use a work email, that's fine. And you don't want to be involved in their personal, that's perfectly fine. But Facebook for Business is free. It allows archiving of all the posts. It allows you to store documents on there. It's a perfect little place to put a lot of that information. And what ends up happening is someone who felt that they weren't learning or they were having trouble, they may feel more comfortable asking an inexperienced person than the boss or someone who's perceived to be a boss or someone that maybe says, oh, well, they're learning. Why'd they ask a dumb question? You ask a new person, they're like, oh, I had the same dumb question last year. So they may feel more comfortable. So from a holistic perspective, that's the kind of ways that I look at it in terms of the learning styles and then leveraging the people in the organization, new and old, to help mentor is the term that Glenn used. And now we just have a different sort of mentorship. It's a more of an electronic and email and text message. And along that line, one of the most important things I think that learning style is you have to capture this information, right? So what we encourage everyone to do from the very beginning of training is open your phone. Do you know how to get to your camera? Do you know how to take a quick note? Do you know how to take a voice record? We use a free tool called Evernote. If you've ever read any of my posts in the general locksmith community, I think it's one of the most underrated, underutilized tools. It's free, and it basically stores, archives, and makes searchable almost anything you encounter, anything you write in it, anything you take pictures on. It's private, but if you want to share something, it makes it very easy to share that. And I don't think that that's just good for the company. I think it's good for the individual to take those pictures, especially if they're going through a new process. And even to ask, hey, let me get a better picture of that instead of just standing out of the way, and make some more of an active participant. Literally, as we go through these things, your job is to document it, use your phone, and so that you can learn these things later. Hey, I might need. I had a person that sent me literally answered a question that I had answered for someone else in Evernote 8 years ago. This happened this week in regards to price per pin code. So it's one of those things where I've got to plant a seed and I got to benefit from it as well.
Well, going back to your earlier question, it's white chocolate macadamia nut or chocolate chunks with sea salt caramel. That's my favorite cookies. If you wanted to make those.
Very nice.
One of the points that you made, I think is very relevant. I heard a guy do this very frequently, and I thought it was I thought it landed well. It's asking the questions to continue to create engagement, but giving the information or giving the answer up front. So he would do something like, "This pen is green. Glenn, what color is this pen?" And then Glenn would say, "It's green." Right. And so you have that continual engagement. So you're giving the answer and then asking for the answer to be given back rather than just, again, like you said, the fire hose of information, hoping that you catch part of it and it kind of lands there. So on that note, Glenn, what's your favorite cookie?
Chocolate chip.
Chocolate chip.
Old chocolate chip.
There you go. Any final
chocolate chip.
Any final closing thoughts? Because I know our time is moving here, but I wanted to kind of get some closing thoughts, and then we'll get out of here today.
Rob, I loved your idea of teacher asking questions and using the Socratic method as well. Had an employee once named Roz Walker, ex-Army, and she taught me that whoever's asking the questions is in control of the conversation. And so great training opportunity there. So my closing thoughts are really demonstrate, imitate, practice. My mom used to say repetition is the mother of learning.
There you go. Rob, your final thoughts.
So the final thought is the other challenge. We've been talking about new people coming into an organization and growing them, which is, to be honest, that's the low-hanging fruit, because there's a forced need for them to learn. There's a forced need. There's a strong motivation. What becomes a challenge is a 25-year plus locksmith that works for you, who is a CML, CMST, CMAL, whatever qualifications and certifications. They're just a very competent person, and to be able to continue to grow with them. Certainly the 5 T's and things that we talked about, time off, terrain, those things are going to be a factor. But I think what I'm about to say may be a little bit controversial in the minds of probably the people who I'm describing, is to try to avoid letting people pigeonhole themselves. And what I mean by that is, well, I'm the residential guy. I'm the automotive girl. I just do cameras. I'm only do access control. So I know the great days of the generalist that just does everything all the time. It has changed. Now we have more specific automotive, specific access control, and it can even be by licenses and certain legalities that it has to be that way. But the ability to cross-train an experienced person into something new, sometimes you come across with stunning results. They can take away resources. They can take away how to look stuff up, things that they may have noticed in automotive. But for example, the storage, we store keys a certain way. Someone goes, oh, man, that's perfect for storing those parts that I had for my access control stuff. So there's cross learning and cross training. And ultimately, sometimes someone may need help And it's a waste to take someone who's a hugely asset to the company, very advanced in their stuff, and just let them float, right? So we have to have a plan for those experienced people, not just for the newbies.
Most definitely. Well, I appreciate you guys being here today. It's been a very interesting conversation, very eye-opening, and I think there's massive takeaways for all of us that are looking at hiring, growing our team, continuing to develop our team. And those are just some things that we can all take and apply. One of the really cool things, and I think Glenn mentioned he's got a little acronym that he uses, and Rob mentioned he's got his list of items as well. One of the things that I've borrowed from the book Traction, which is, if you've talked to me for any amount of time, it's one of my favorite business books. It talks about the GWC method when you're talking about growing your employees. Do they get it? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity to do it? And that's an easy filter that you can go through the interview process or through any type of process as you're continuing to develop your team. So again, thank you to Rob and Glenn for your time today through the conversation. Thank you to H.L. Flake for continuing to promote these types of conversation for our industry. This is a very big value add. If you're in the industry, if you're trying to grow your business, if you're trying to develop your business, trying to hone that in, these are the types of conversations that'll help put you in the right mindset and continue to help grow in just as a leader in your business as well. So thank you again to H.L. Flake for continuing to promote this conversation on this episode of the Security Professional Business Roundtable, and we'll see you next